Hello and welcome to the Saginaw Valley Spoken Word Podcast featuring spoken word poets from the Saginaw area. Today we are joined by Donny Winter. Hi Donny, how are you?
I am doing quite well. How are you?
I'm good on this fine Wednesday morning.
It is a beautiful day, and I am excited to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation and offering up this space. Thank you.
Of course, we're excited to have you. So I guess to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you from the Saginaw area? Your creative focuses, kind of background, stuff like that.
Absolutely. So, interestingly, I actually was born in West Branch, which is about 50 miles north of here.
Yeah.
Lived there all of my life, and then during the pandemic, I moved to Saginaw. Lived
Gotcha.
here for about 3 years or so. I wrote my first two collections of poems in Saginaw, so Saginaw has a very special place in my heart. I then moved to Midland. It's a little bit more geographically desirable for my family, but I love coming back here and enjoying the artistic scene very much because I think that poetry flourishes in this area.
Awesome. And that's kind of a question I've been asking some of our featured poets is, why do you think that your poetry works so well in Saginaw? And I've noticed a lot of talking about how this is like a hub for creativity. And as someone, I've lived here my whole life, and it's weird because for me, I find I have to like find those spots. I find it doesn't flourish everywhere. So how is that for you of like finding the right place for your poetry to live, I guess?
That's an excellent question. I mean, as an LGBTQ plus poet, I would say that that's my focus largely. Like I write about the LGBTQ plus experience through the lens of a lot of like nature imagery. I have really struggled to kind of like find my place because obviously we live in a time where depending on where you go, the LGBTQ plus community is villainized. We see a lot of like anti-LGBTQ plus legislation out there. We see book bans happening across different states. So like in the back of my mind, like ever since I've grown up in rural Michigan, like I've always kind of thought of like where do I feel safe? And I felt very safe, in uniquely in each of the places that I've been in, but Saginaw very much so because I do feel like it has a very rich history when it comes to poetry. And I would argue that the Theodore Roethke Museum is one of those focal points that really creates that. So once I became connected in that capacity, I think I felt a greater sense of belonging in the community as a poet.
Hey, awesome. And I want to say I think it's so important to have poets like you, poets that focus on things like LGBTQ, women's rights, minority rights, things like that. Because like you said, we're living in a time where those things can be villainized, and it's good. I'm very much a person that I think art speaks for change, very much so. And so I think it's always important to have artists that are willing to show that no, we're people just like you, and we're no different than you, and we just want to be accepted just like you. As someone, I'm also LGBTQ. I always appreciate seeing poets that talk about kind of the universal experience of being who we are. So I very much appreciate that, and I'm excited to hear what you've brought today.
Well, that means a lot to me. I wanted to add something really quick based on what you said. I mean, what I do beyond writing, I also teach. And one thing that I often have my students ask in poetry classes is like, why, like, I'm here to write poetry, but why is poetry significant? Because at certain points in our education, poetry is kind of just like this, you know, this other thought where like it's kind of relegated to like this little corner. And I tell them like poetry has always been an examination of the human experience, right? And the human experience is an inherently diverse one. There are so many people from different walks of life who write poetry, and we learn about them and we learn about that diversity through reading about their experiences via the poetry. So, and I think I say that because many students kind of get up in their minds where they're like, I'm not really sure how my experience fits into writing poetry. And I'm like, well, first and foremost, we have to realize that your experience matters, right? And then once we get past that, then we make the realization that whatever you write about, especially if it's an extension of your history, might connect with someone, even when you may not realize it does.
Right. Yeah, that's something I've always appreciated with poetry, because when I first started my degree, I wasn't all I had known of poetry was the I guess quote unquote the olden days of the Shakespeare and the rhyming, and I was always like, I can't write this. I can't make this. But to see how much it's changed and how much it's evolved and how much it's modernized and how much people have made it their own, it's very inspiring to see that. And that's something that Farah and I have noticed a lot with doing this podcast, is just how much each poet who's been in here has like crafted it to fit them. Like they haven't been like pigeonholed by it. I've never used that word in my entire life. I don't even know if I used it correctly. But they've never been like boxed in to poetry. They've always felt that they can move about the spaces they'd like and make it their own. And that's something that's really refreshing to see, especially as a creative writing major myself. I feel like as writers, I feel like we all struggle a little bit with, how do I make this mine and make it original, but also hit at an audience that will understand where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. I think that was well put.
Thank you. I try. All right. So what have you brought to read today?
So I have 3 poems that I'm going to be performing for you today. So this first piece is one of my more nature-esque poems. It's basically about nostalgia. It's in my recent collection, Casting Seeds, and it's titled Vacancies in an Overtaken Lawn. Even still, as leaves curl their crisp fingers inward, they recall the years through trunk rings, sap synapses, and mycelium below. Even still, these roots hold each soil clod together to sustain this lawn, overtaken, a vacant lot left by a family long grown. Even still, as grass touches the lowest branches, stems map our remnants in the shapes of our bodies playing hide and seek.
Wow. I loved that. I love the use of imagery. I'm very much an imagery nerd. I love when people
Oh, me too.
I love when people use like a new take on imagery. I've never heard like sap synapses. Like I've never heard those words before. So that was very cool to hear, to experience.
Thank you. When I wrote that piece, the entire collection, Casting Seeds, is about my grandmother and celebrating how, as a young queer person, she kind of taught me my first sense of self and also a love of gardening. Yes. But I couldn't stop thinking about like all of these memories I had with like cousins, people we never see each other anymore because families drift, right? So like those spaces the memories associated with those spaces keep us together in some fashion.
That's a really beautiful way to put it, I think.
Thank you. So the next piece is a little darker. This is from my second collection, Feats of Alchemy. So this entire book is about how, as LGBTQ plus people, we navigate various things that go under-discussed post coming out. And I have a series of poems in this book titled Queer Confessions. That's about 10 poems, and each of them, I would say, discuss an intimate aspect of my experience being LGBTQ plus post coming out. And this one specifically, this is Queer Confession number 7, I wrote during a time where we were kind of worried about the Supreme Court reversing marriage equality and people basically being like, Donny, don't be dramatic about that. That's not going to happen. And I was like, don't tell me to not be overdramatic.
Don't tell me to not be scared about my future and the future of millions of people.
Exactly. So this piece is kind of about that universal LGBTQ plus struggle to find belonging. And it's titled Queer Confession number 7. Few fathom how we dreamed, How our teenage summers were spent calculating compatibility with straight boy crushes, crafting domestic scenarios where we lived the lives of our friends who were voted most popular, voted best couple, destined to sway through smoky high school gymnasiums as prom royalty. Few fathom how we dreamed, how we doodled our names next to theirs in sad diaries hidden from parental eyes, how we filled our vacancies with heroic Prince Charmings, kingly Aragorns, or anime heartthrobs, because each trail of dream crumbs kept our heads above water, kept us breathing. Few fathom how we dreamed, how we smiled our way through each friend's wedding, wondering if our turn was in the cards or if we should marry our careers for the security of belonging, because each mounting rejection filled our interiors with a cement, keeping us grounded to the reality we always knew. Few fathomed how we dreamed, how we secretly wondered if each friend's setup, blind date, or hookup might lead to the one, like the ending to every romantic comedy we had attended as the fifth wheel, carefully playing our role as the sarcastic comic, staving the craving for connection. Few fathom how we dreamed. How our roaring 20s were spent playing catch-up, a frantic mania deepened with each wedding invitation, baby shower announcement, and house closing, while we still linger in our one-room studios and lay our dreams to rest like saints. Few fathom how we dreamed, how we survived our marriages to material, to careers, how we continued to quake in flickering, half-filled bars to chase our original highs, because the dreams we've placed in museums have warped into mausoleums, a resolve to honor the youth we've laid to rest. Few fathom how we dreamed, how long it's taken to gather ourselves, to celebrate the way our broken pieces shine despite the way these pressure cracks spider across the edges of our eyes, a line for each smile we've stapled as a mask to mask our lack of mask. Few fathom how we dreamed, how surprised we become when we find someone, how basking in the glow of their smiling eyes fills our Plutonian interiors with the warmth of sun, how when we dance for the first time in the quiet of our bedrooms we pretend to sway at a prom we should have had, that we deserved. Few fathom how we dreamed, how we'll travel any length to find each other because no distance compares to the parsecs of shame we navigate, isolation in an interstellar vacuum.
Oh, that was very beautiful. I felt very connected to that on a couple levels. You mentioned something that I don't hear mentioned a lot with LGBTQ community is the stereotype in movies and TV shows of just the one LGBTQ person by themselves, the comedy relief, just kind of standing on the sidelines while the action is happening. I feel like that really, at least to me, that kind of encompassed your piece of saying we're not just meant to be on the sidelines, we're meant to be the main character too.
Absolutely. One of my earliest memories kind of connected with that was, of course, going to homecoming or prom in high school, right? And the fact that so many LGBTQ plus people may go to those, but they may not get the full experience that everyone else gets. And because we spend so much time, investing energy in being someone else to keep ourselves safe, we lose out on a lot. And I think when we eventually do come out, we're frantically playing like this catch up, right? And I wanted to really capture that in that poem because that is a very unique aspect of our experience that I think does not get represented enough in media or discussed enough. The fact that we have to kind of rebuild ourselves after coming out and, recapture the experiences that we've watched everyone else experience over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And, because at least for me, it was in high school, it was a lot of playing the role, not really being myself. So when you get out of high school and you're out of the house and you're allowed to be yourself, you've missed out on all of these childhood things that everyone else got to do themselves and you got to do kind of behind like a mask. in a way.
Absolutely. And we get used to it too.
Right.
We get used to that feeling because when we get to the point of being in a space where we aren't the other all the time, it feels so unusual, right? Like, how do we not be the other when we've been placed in that position constantly?
Yeah, and when we're constantly told that that's where we belong by, I guess you could say, government higher up people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Government, higher up people, bullies that we had, people who just didn't see us for who we actually are, right? But I think that the reason why this poetry matters to me is because I think that representation through the poetry is that learning experience that people, you know, might benefit from in some way. So the last poem that I'm going to share is actually a gay love poem. I figured I would end on an uplifting note. So this poem is in my first collection, Carbon Footprint. This book came out in 2020. Good year, right, for everybody. So like I was so reflective that year, and I actually had the time to write a lot. And I actually had gifted this poem to my fiance our first Valentine's Day, and I was like, this needs to be in this collection. We need more gay love poetry in the world.
We do.
So
We really do.
so this poem is titled Snow Day. The Sauvignon sits on the coffee table, a gasoline that gets us through Pokemon battles. Entrails from last night's snowstorm slither away, leaving us battened inside, a pleasant cabin fever. Slowly, sunlight refracts through wine, casts amber across the table and onto you. And there you sit, one leg draped across mine, the other stretched across the table. We knot ourselves together until we lose where we're intertwined, yet as the couch swallows us whole, we laugh and sip our glasses of hard-earned wine. You smile at me as I doze and call my name to keep me awake. The butterflies that infest my chest carry me beyond the exosphere, where even 1,000 suns pale in the wake of knowing you're still here. You're perfect, you say in a daze as you reach over to rub my scruff. As the Sauvignon gets low, you pour more and teach me I am good enough.
That was so sweet.
Thank you.
That was so cute. You're right. We do need more gay love stories out there. We don't have much to choose from.
It's
so.
getting better, but there's still always work to
it
do.
Is. Yes, always. But I really enjoyed that. Thank you for bringing your work with you today. Are these all available for purchase?
Yes. So you can get them on Amazon. You can get them through Leopard Print Books, which is a local bookstore in Bay City. You can get them at Bookmarks in Midland, and you can get them at Sleepy Dog Books in Mount Pleasant.
Awesome. Can I ask selfishly how was it getting published? Like, how was that journey getting published? Are you self-published, or did you publish through a publisher?
So I published through a small press. It was an interesting experience. I remember in 2020 I was sitting on my book Carbon Footprint for I had a draft of it for probably several years before it got published, and then watching one of my dear friends get published, Jared Morningstar. I adore that person so much. He's such a phenomenal human being. I saw him get published, and I was like, you know what, Donny, it's time that you stop being scared of submitting your work and actually do it. So I focused myself that summer during the pandemic, finished Carbon Footprint, and started putting it out there. I got a few rejections, I got a few acceptances, but I decided to opt with Alien Buddha Press, which is a small press that focuses a lot on pop cultural publications, and then it was a whirlwind from there.
Nice. Well, congratulations. I think as writers, that's the scariest part, is putting your work out there to be published. At least for me, that's a terrifying thing.
And it is scary. To this day, it can be kind of scary sometimes still for me too. But I think we live in a very unique time where there are so many modes of publication. Small presses, large presses. Those are, of course, very difficult to get typically. Even self-publishing, like I think, offers its own merits, and I think that all of which, depending on the individual, whatever route you choose to take, is the route best for you, whatever you choose.
You mentioned Jared Morningstar. I I almost took a class with him, but he taught this past year's creative writing fiction course, and I've heard very wonderful things about him. So I've heard that he is like a great addition to have here.
A great teacher, a great poet, a great fiction writer, and I am grateful to consider him a friend.
Aw, well, that's awesome. Is there, I guess, to leave us off here, is there anything else you have coming up that you'd like to let people know about?
So I will be at Great Lakes Bay Pride when that gets rescheduled. I think they're in the process of rescheduling that.
Yes.
It was unfortunately canceled due to weather, and I should be doing some programming at the Rutke House. I think in August sometime there's going to be a workshop I'm facilitating, and I will be doing a poetry reading as well. So that's something to look forward to.
Wonderful. Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we leave off? Anything for listeners that you'd like to get out there?
Sure. I would say if I were to like kind of impart anything to other writers out there or aspiring writers, one of the biggest obstacles we have to get through is the way we kind of stand, in the way of ourselves when it comes to writing. Writer's block, insecurities, imposter syndrome. I know I've struggled with all of those in the past. At the end of the day, as long as you remember that your work will impact someone's life, even when you don't see it, that will be the catalyst that sets you on your journey, I think, to especially get out of those points where you might feel inhibited by one of those obstacles.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for coming all the way out here. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.